Okay, first up is Deonte. Okay, yeah, that's looking good. I like the opener. I like the kind of foreground distortion thing that you have in there. That really gives it some depth and interest. I think that worked out well in the way it's kind of out of focus. And I think this is good. It looks like I'm trying to figure out if it's actually a render or a play blast. Sort of looks like a play blast, although looks like you have some sort of shadow thing going on. But yeah, I mean, I think there's not that much to critique on. I think the camera move works well. It's sort of simple and decelerates at the end and lands on a subject. So yeah, I think you did well and did a good job. I guess the only thing you could improve would be the rendering and getting a little bit more of a look to the lighting and some cast shadows. But it's good work. Next up is Clive. Okay, so yeah, on the opener, I think it's all right. I think the the way the whole body moves back and forth, it looks kind of odd. I mean, you might play with a puppet tool to get just the gun to move separately from the rest of the body. I thought that it transitioned, you know, pretty well from this into the actual piece. There was this. So the problem with this is the kind of boxed edge of this, and so I'm not sure how you went about that happened. I'm wondering if it was effect that was put on some kind of pre-comp or something like that. I'd be interested to know, but I think that looks weird to have those sharp edges to the kind of blurry thing, and I think you want it to sort of more fade into the background. So if it is because it's a pre-comp, don't do it as a pre-comp. Just have it all in the same comp. Um, if it's not, I would just have to look at your After Effects to understand what happened. I think that transition is good, but then the audio cuts out here a little bit abruptly. So I would kind of more gradually fade that down. And I thought the camera movement looks good and the render looks good, so nice job on that. Next up is Jersey. All right, I think the opener looks really nice. I like what you've done with lightning, um, and I think this text on that kind of aged paper works well. Might be good to play with the timing a little with this. I mean, if maybe the firing of the gun could go faster, because right now, compared to a real gun, it's quite slow. I do like the stylized fire. I think I might go for a simpler movement with a bullet, but it's all right. So overall, the opener I think is good, and I think for this, I think you should go for a simpler camera move. I think you're just trying to go just to cover too much ground a little bit too fast, and see if you can maybe just do less and simplify it. I think with what I think you know it seems like you've made a careful effort to kind of have a nice movement showing nice parts of the set and moving past things, and you certainly didn't go through any surfaces or anything like that. So I mean, it was clearly thoughtful, but I just think it's just so much to try and cover in such a short period of time that it's a little bit too much. So and then further, I think it looks just like a playblast. I think it doesn't look rendered. but either way there's no shadow, so if you get it rendered, that would be an improvement. Next up is George. All right. I think the opener seems like it's improved. You do need a fade up for both the images and the audio at the start. But I think this is working better now than it did, if my memory serves correct. Let me just turn this off. The way the skull kind of moves out of the way of the bullets. Excuse me. That works well. And the way that pushes him off is good. I like the camera flying through the tower there. Everything is a little bit bright and a little bit evenly lit. Might be good to have a little more contrast. If it's a bright, cloudless, sunlit day, there's going to be some dark shadows. I do think your building's got some good textures on it, and I like this Marshall sign. That looks nice. But yeah, some kind of darker shadows and more kind of cast shadows would improve this. And maybe frame these guys so they're a little low in the frame for the end. It's like it's very tilted up, but if they're the main focus, I think maybe you'd have a little less headroom for the where the shot ends. Next up is Anna, and one of the things that Anna did that I think is important for everyone to know is send her After Effects file, but the After Effects file by itself doesn't allow me to see anything. The reason is that the After Effects file doesn't actually contain any of the images, sounds, or videos you use in your piece. It just sort of points to them wherever they are on your hard drive. So to be able to if you don't already have them already really well organized in a folder, After Effects can do that for you. If you go File, Dependencies, Collect Files, it will collect all of the source files, and then you can tell it to reveal it in Explorer when finished, so it should open, where that folder is, and then you can just zip that folder and send that along with the After Effects file, and then I'd have all the source files and actually be able to see your work. But just send the After Effects file by itself doesn't allow me to see what's going on. And this is Anna's piece. Okay, yeah, I think this turned out well. It seems like it's improved from how it was before. I like the TV scratching. I think this is definitely better than what you had before, but I think you could even just put on the hat and stop. Just because that kind of works, but then as soon as he does that, it still looks a little awkward. And I think that's just a limitation of trying to animate something in this way, unless you're going to kind of hand draw it each frame. You really can't get the arm to move that believably and as complex of a movement you're trying. So it's not that you haven't put a good effort towards doing it, it's just that the limitations of doing that way is, I don't think it's a really great path to success on that. And then I think this, again, I'm not sure why we're seeing the edge of the box. My guess is that it's like a pre-comp that's been dropped in there, but again, I'd have to see the file with the source images in there to really diagnose it. So if you want to send those over, I'll take a look. And I thought this was looking pretty good. You definitely, you got the cast shadows I keep talking about in there, so it is rendered and it looks pretty clean, and the camera movement's good. So Leo had a couple questions here, and I just wanted to look at play blasting for a moment. So here I am in the scene, and if I right mouse click on the timeline and go to play blast options, one of the things you'll see is that the display size is from the window. So you can have display size from render settings or custom, and if you do custom, you can just put in the size. I like to do from render settings and set this to, what you want it to be. So for example, if you wanted it to be, HT 720, for example, the other thing to do is make sure the scale is at 100% at 1, because otherwise it will, it'll make it half of 1280 by 720. And then, as far as some of the stuff that shows up in the view, you can kind of uncheck those here, and so it shouldn't show those things there. And then as far as the, the resolution gate and all that kind of stuff, you just need to go into your camera settings. You can do that right there. And well, actually, I just want to do view camera settings. Just do no gate. And now there'll be no gate. It's set to from render settings, so it will do the size you have in render settings. You can see, it still has the camera name in here, but I think because you have show ornaments turned off, that it will leave that out of the image, and you can browse to where you want to save it. So that's just a few tips on Play Blast that hopefully should solve your problem. And here's Leo's piece. Okay, so yeah, I think the opener's okay. I mean, I think we've talked about some improvements before. It's a little simple, and it's not doing that much. So you could think of adding to it, but we're sort of past that at this point. So, and yeah, I think all the Play Blast things I just went over, but ideally you would render it out and have some better lighting and cast shadows would be the improvements to make on this. But I think even if it was just Play Blast at the full size, it would look sharper, and that would be better too. Next up is Xana. Okay, so yeah, I think there's still some improvements you can make to the opener. Like I said, I don't think these sort of sparkle fountain things are quite working for that. So I might if you just got rid of those and still had the stars going up, I think that would be an improvement. Music is a good choice, and I think I had talked before, it might be good to see the holes appear one at a time with the gunshot sound. I'll turn the sound up. And I just went over the framing thing on the Play Blast, but I can show that again real quick. If all you need to do is under camera settings, put on no gate. So if resolution gate's on, you'll get that. If you put on no gate, it'll go away. And in your Play Blast options, if you have it set to display size from render settings, and then at 100%, it'll render it out at the size of whatever you have set here, or or more to the point there. So yeah, I think the main improvement on this is that I think the camera moves fine. I think you need to ideally it would be rendered or at least Play Blasted a little cleaner. Next up is J-Min. Alright, so I think this is improved. I think on opener, I still think this logo could be kind of cleaned up, like these kind of areas here, but I think it's looking all right. And I think maybe you've toned down the burning. I think it still could be more subtle because again, it looks like rather than wood being like those text being burned into the wood, it looks like we're seeing through the wood to a fire that's behind it. You know, like as if there's a hole. And I think so. So just go much more subtle with any of the orange stuff and just do the burn-in more. And yeah, it looks like a clean render with shadows, so that looks all right. They're a little pixelated, so I don't know if that's shadows you just got from the, turning the shadows on in the play blast, or if you rendered it. It kind of looks like more like a play blast because there isn't really much anti-aliasing going on. But it looks good and clean, so that's good. And the camera move works well. Next up is Chavez. Okay, so I mean, I think I like this sort of logo at the beginning. I think maybe the flashing goes on. I really probably think you just need one flash. And I think this isn't working. It's very strange how close the planets are together at the beginning, and you're still doing the flash. And then, of course, having these elements in it, you don't want that either. So if you are going to play blast, in the play blast options, make sure to, turn off the view and the showing the ornaments and all that stuff. And I think it's interesting the way you've done the ground stuff, although it's a bit patchy. It's nice that you've put textures on everything. It looks like you've pulled in some different characters. I think that maybe the camera move could have gone a little further to kind of frame the characters for the starting point of the story. So you could take that probably, get that camera move to go a little bit further. So it ends up framing those guys nicely, preferably with a view of, the building you modeled. And then getting rid of the camera view name and then getting it rendered would improve it as well. Okay. Next up is Melissa. All right. Yeah, I think that works really well all around. I think the transition, with from this into the moving camera works pretty nicely. I think it helps that there's movement on this and movement in the beginning of the shot, and then that feels very sort of continuous, and also with the train going. And I like the camera flying over the top and landing. I think maybe it ends a little bit abruptly. Maybe you could have the camera kind of gradually come to a rest and then just hold on them for a moment before you fade out. But besides that, it's looking pretty clean and nicely put together. Next up is Haley. Okay, so yeah, I think on the opener, it's a little bit simplistic, but at least this, the opening thing it's simple but it's clean. It's there's nothing wrong with it. I think this is problematic to have the text with the image through it and then another image behind it. I mean, I think if you did something like you had a black background and then you were seeing like a a slowly moving scene through the text, that might be interesting. But to have the two on top of each other, I think, is a bit busy of an image, and doesn't work well together. I like the train moving. I think the camera move is all right, the way it comes over the top. And I don't like how it passes through surfaces. I think you're going to want to avoid that. So I think you might try a somewhat different path there. And I might try to end, closer to your characters if they're the main subject. I mean, there's nothing, inherently wrong with starting with a wider shot of the characters, since they do seem to be centered enough that it's understood that that's what we're supposed to be looking at. But I think probably the biggest problem is it passing through the surfaces. And then, yeah, if you can get it rendered with shadows, and maybe it looks like you lost your texture here or something happened with this surface, you might want to troubleshoot that as well.